How you enjoying the whole podcast thing?
Oh, I like the podcast thing. It's been good. Somebody told me to go on this site called Chartable, and I can see where everybody ranks on podcasts and things like that. Well, it's moving averages and everything. And I just assumed I would be at the bottom of the list, to be honest with you, since it just started and I was up a lot higher than I thought. So that was encouraging. I don't have many downloads, but I don't know how it does the tracking, but it at least made me feel like, all right, well, going in the right direction.
Well, people love you. I mean, even when you come on my show, people are always giving me wicked positive feedback.
Oh, that's nice of them.
Yeah, the only negative feedback I get every once in a while when you're on my show is they want me to shut up and let you talk more.
Well, I prefer you talk, to be honest, but or both of us talk, because it's not like you said, we've talked about this before, how it's kind of modeled on the Joe Rogan experience, where it's not an interview. There's not a list of questions. It's just two guys talking. So, you should be talking as much as I am, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. It's not something I really keep that much track of. I tried. I know I am like notorious sometimes. Especially like I feel like of late because of the impact of what's been going on to like my family, my friends, the constant conversations with people I know personally, the constant conversation with people online, the fans contacting me. Like I feel like I've been more emotionally invested in this than other stories.
Yeah.
And I could see myself, like I remember when we did the live stream podcast with our big dumb mouth Midnight Mike, and I remember like I was re-listening to it, some of it while I was doing some editing, just kind of compressing it and whatnot, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, I got fucking worked up talking about this shit, but it's one of those things where it's because it's affecting us so personally. Myself, it's hard not to get worked up.
I agree. It's a legitimate. There's never been a better reason to be pissed off about this stuff, and I think people. That's why we're recording it right now. We could very easily record these shows 8 months from now and talk about how it made us feel back in April and March and everything. But what good is that? It's better to get it like right now while we're right in the middle of it, and we can assess our feelings, and we can speculate about what we think is happening or what we think will happen. It's good to look back on that and be able to sort of say, oh, I was close there, or I was way off on this aspect of it, or I was out of my mind and something else. But this is when we need to do it. If we'd had shows back when 9/11 was happening, it'd be the same situation. You'd be animated as hell. I'm sure it would. I know I would have been, and I would have been like, those fucking Muslims and all that stuff. I was totally just chugging the Kool-Aid back then. And so it would have actually been embarrassing, but fascinating if I'd had a show, if someone had just said, sit down and like do this, record this quick interview about how you feel about 9/11 on the day after it, it would be so fascinating to sit back and watch it. So I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad we're doing it now. I'm glad we're pissed off about it. I'm glad that we'll look back on it and maybe we will assess our demeanor and say, you guys should have been 4 times more angry than you really were back then. You didn't even know how bad it was going to get or whatever. Or maybe it'll be like, oh, you guys got all worked up over nothing. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah. It is interesting, and it is cool to be able to capture exactly how you feel right in this moment. You have kids, Charlie?
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old daughter.
Yeah. So one thing I've thought about too when I started my podcast is like, one thing you think about sometimes, you ponder on is like, what was my dad how was he when he was my age? Or like, if I could hear him have a conversation at that time, how interesting it would be. And with our podcast, we can do that. Like our kids can be adults, we can be long gone, and they can go back and listen to us as we evolved as adults, as we're dealing with fatherhood and all that stuff. And it's super fascinating. Because you basically are archiving so much of your perspectives and opinions throughout these years. And I know going back to old episodes, which I don't do ever unless I'm like sharing it or whatnot, because I'm always so embarrassed about how much I sucked and whatnot. And every podcaster goes through that. I think it's not even just podcaster. Every artists, I guess, for a lack
Yeah.
of a better term. When I was playing music, same thing. I hated going back listening to old demo tapes. I'm sure comedians are the same way. They go back, listen to old stuff, and like it sucks. And podcasting is no different. But it's interesting to see how I've changed even just throughout these 6 years, and how like my opinions have slightly changed. And then it's also interesting how some things haven't changed at all. I think
Yeah.
that's super
Yeah.
interesting too. And I think as time goes by, you're going to find yourself kind of looking back, also wondering the same thing. Like, I wonder, what I thought about this then, or what I thought about, if my opinions changed on this topic or that topic.
Yeah. And I've been doing this introspection type thing for the last year, more so than others years, because I'm 47 now, and when I just turned 47, I now passed the age that my dad was when he died. My dad was 46 when he died, and so now I for the like a year leading up to that, and then the whole year I was 46. I was having these thoughts of like, well, this is the same age my dad was when he died, and when I was 16, looking up to him, he seemed so much older and had it all figured out and together and whatnot. And then I got to his age, and I realized, good Lord, like I know nothing. I'm trying to, I don't have it figured out. I must have just assumed that he had it figured out, and so. I know how I think about things, and so I've been doing that. I've been looking back on that. Just in general, we're taking the podcast component out of it, just thinking about how, if I could have that conversation with him now, how much would we align in the way we feel about things. And now also starting my own show and having it sort of on video, that never goes away. I can then look back on it and see if my opinions on things change or if they stay the same. And I've always been upfront about it, whether it was in the books or doing interviews or doing podcasts, my own podcast. I've been saying, I reserve the right to change my mind on things if new information is presented to me. I don't want to get too married to any particular thing. Like, I think I know what happened and I know how I feel about a lot of things, but in the event that some new information comes and it changes the way I see an event, then I want to give myself the flexibility to change. I don't want to be so rigid that I can't, be flexible if something new comes about, because I look back on, what I know now versus what I knew 10 years ago, and a lot has changed. And so my opinions can change, and I want to be able to allow that to happen, because I want to make sure that what I'm saying is the most accurate and best version of my take on the situation. So to see this now and kind of bookmark this for us, how we feel. Are we angry about the lockdown? Are we scared of this coronavirus? Do we think it's nonsense? It'll be fascinating to look back on these episodes and see if our years of digging into all of the political and media lies paid off, and that we were way ahead of the curve and we recognized some of the aspects of this pandemic, the not so organic components of it, and how much we just flat out missed. And I think that it'll probably be cringy for us to watch some of these episodes later, but it's good to have them out there, because like everybody, we don't have a crystal ball. We're just assessing this situation and talking about how we feel about it based on the evidence that we have. But we also realize that we don't have all the evidence, and that even some of the evidence that we have that we think is good might turn out to be full of holes later. So it's a weird time. Everybody's a microbiologist. I found out. It turns out everybody on Twitter is a virologist, and so that's fun to argue with people about that. So it's we're in a weird time, but I think we all acknowledge that we're in a weird time. It's like a slow motion car accident that we're all living through, and it's scary and exciting and frustrating, and it's devastating for billions of people. And I don't even know that it had to have happened like this. And I think that what we're starting to see as of today, which is April 17th, 2020, we're starting to see people get a little bit tired of being cooped up, and not just cooped up, but a little bit tired of, they're starting to go through and find out that the stories they've been told by the media and these doctors are not adding up, and you're starting to see some pushback, not by everybody, but by a segment of the population. And so it's going to be fascinating to see where things go in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, are people going to erupt and just say we're done with this? I mean, are we the people going to make the decision on when the lockdown ends? Or are we going to allow the media to make that decision for us, or Bill Gates, or Fauci, or any of these, or Donald Trump, or whoever? So it's interesting to see where we go from here. But the American public is starting to come to a boil. They're starting to get a little bit restless in our houses.
Well, I think people are looking around and they're like, where are all the dead bodies? Where are the friends and family and relatives that are supposed to die? Where are I mean, there's been a couple deaths in the town I live in. One, unfortunately, was actually a cousin of mine who passed away a couple days ago. And
Oh no.
it's, first thing I thought of was, I hope it wasn't coronavirus, because he was only 51 years old. And, it is one of those things where I've been kind of preaching to everybody that, like, this isn't going to kill you. And it was actually a heart failure, which I was kind of glad, because I to be completely honest with you, I did think, like, I was just talking to him like the last couple of weeks about like how this is all bullshit, and I'm like I was like legitimately concerned. I'm like, I hope I did not, but that's the thing, like, we're human, and we are going to have these doubts, and again, like, I try to take in consideration that people are listening, and when I say stuff, I truly believe it. So I'm not I am practicing what I'm preaching. So when I say that, like, I truly believe that the majority of people have nothing to worry about. I mean, first of all, I'm not the only one who truly believes that. Dr. Birx, just about everybody, every expert has said the majority of people who are dying are old people and people who have a pre-existing condition. He was only 51, I believe, which is young, and similar to your father, very young. My mother-in-law passed away. I think she was in her mid 50s. So it is wild, because when you're younger, you just assume that everybody's living till 80. Like they say, the average age is 80. And then when it happens to I remember when my mother-in-law passed away, I mean, it didn't just affect her, but it affected everybody around her. And it was it's fucking, I mean, but this is one of the issues with the average American lifestyle and diet. It's like everything is just, it adds up to bad health, because you look at, like, I mean, the good thing about this quarantine is, like, people are probably getting the much needed sleep that they probably don't get on a regular basis, with just, like, getting to work early, leaving work late, just never taking, some people work on weekends, and it's just like constant go. And it's not just a physical stress, but the mental stress of it all definitely has a huge impact on your health. So it is, there are some good things in regards to this. I still wish it had more to do with people just making these decisions on their own, like deciding that, hey, I need a healthier lifestyle. Maybe I need to work less hours, maybe, but if we're looking for, I guess, if we're being optimistic and kind of looking for the bright side of it all, some people are spending more time with close family. The thing that really pisses me off is when this first happened, I was like, okay, I was telling my wife, I'm like, worst case scenario, we have people over the house, we get together with the family, like, we spend more quality time with people. And then more and more people start getting paranoid, and more people, because this was right in the beginning, before they really were telling people not to even get close to each other, before they told you to get 6 feet away from anybody and whatnot. People seem willing to kind of be like, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. We'll just take this as a opportunity to spend more quality time with friends and family. And, especially living in the East Coast, we do live very fast-paced lives where a lot of times it's hard to do just the things you enjoy, because you're constantly doing the things you have to do, and you're not doing spending a lot of time doing the things you would like to do. And I like to try to balance that stuff as much as possible. Probably too much towards the things I like to do at times, but and then then they told you, like, don't even get together with your friends, don't even get together with your family. I was in contact with a few friends and family members, and I'm like, hey, you guys ever want to come over? If you're bored, if you're going fucking crazy, I'm like, my door is always open. I'm like, I truly believe that we're going to be fine. My kids take their vitamins. They eat healthy. Unfortunately, I probably spend way too much money on organic food, and just and I truly believe that like we do our best to like get them outside as much as possible, get vitamin D, get some fresh air. I'm like, I don't think that we're gonna be in any danger whatsoever. And I'm like, so if you want to come over, if you're going fucking crazy and you're worried about public shaming because you don't want to even suggest possibly getting together with some friends because you're worried about the way they're going to react. I'm like, don't worry about that at my house. Come over anytime. And we were having a couple get-togethers. I mean, just about every weekend, at least one either Friday or Saturday night, we'd have some friends over, have some drinks. We'd watch some old fights or whatever on TV, or we'd play some video games. And so many people the next day, just about everybody, especially the first time we did it, would text message us the next morning saying, "Thank you so much. I that was so needed. Like it was so nice just to be around other people and communicate and laugh and talk and it kind of showed what damage it was doing psychologically because of just like something as simple as just getting together and playing some video games and having some drinks. How much fun that was. So have you been doing anything similar? Have you been in contact with some friends who the ones that aren't afraid of this whole nonsense?
Well, funny you say that because last night, yesterday was one of my buddy's birthdays, and so he sent out a text message and said everybody's got to download this house party app, and at 9 o'clock everyone's going to jump on, and we're just gonna chat and hang out, and it's just, I don't know if you, for those that don't know what it is, it's like a group call, like what we did last time with OBDM. Except we had 8 people on the call all at once. So you can do it through your cell phone or through your laptop or whatever. And so I just had it on my cell phone, and it was all my roommates from right after college when I lived in Hermosa Beach for 10 years. And so it was all my friends and roommates from that. And we were just, the common denominator was one of the guys, it was his birthday. So that was the reason why we all got together. But once we got on the call, we were just talking about crazy stuff that we had done 20 years ago and all the people we knew and what everyone was doing and
sharing stories,
bagging on each other and just giving each other a hard time about stuff. And when I got off that call, I felt a million times better. I didn't realize I felt bad before, but I could tell that I felt better. So my baseline for what I'm feeling has been, set quite a bit lower, and I didn't realize it until I had that interaction with everybody, and it just kind of, and it might have been that it just kind of made me remember the times right after college when we were all kind of carefree and all had, 4 of us were living in one big house at the beach and we were having a good time. And so it brought back all those memories, which of course was great, but it also reminded me that like, there's a world outside of my house. Not that I'm complaining about being in my house, but I'm in Denver and it was also snowing yesterday all day. And like 2 days before that, it was snowing all day then. So there was a point while it was snowing and we were having dinner. It was on Easter, actually. It was Easter and it was snowing and everything. And I said to my wife, I feel like it's Christmas, and so it was very disorienting in that sense because we had, the family over and we were having like a nice dinner and it was snowing and it's April, but it felt like it was Christmas evening. And so I was really kind of tripping out as far as like I'd been locked up. I felt like, God, I've been locked up for so long, I can't even tell what day it is. And then the weather had changed, it reverted back to winter, so that was throwing me off, and it was just very weird. So this whole week has been a bit of a trip. Like I said, I can't complain too much about being cooped up. I enjoy where I live, and I've got we have like a multi-generational type living situation here. So I've got me and my wife and my daughter, and also my wife's mom and her stepdad too. So we've got like this big house and they're on one floor and we're on the other floor. And so we've got people around, but it's still, we're all going a bit crazy. We've got my daughter on Zoom calls for school. We've got my father-in-law on Zoom calls for work. We've got, I'm doing Zoom interviews with everybody and everything. And so at one point during the day, there's 5 of us in the house, and 4 of us were on different Zoom calls all at once. So, it's just like the world has turned into this virtual reality. And so, it might be a good thing that everybody got a little bit of a break. I don't think anyone will really look at it like that. But like you said, to slow down and sort of get sleep and be around your family, that's not the worst thing in the world. I think it's gone on a bit too much. I think people are like, all right, seeing my family, I'm ready to get back out into the world, and I'm ready to, my wife probably wants to stab me, I'm sure, and she's ready to get back to work. But half of the people at her work got laid off, and her work's office place, they just packed up all their stuff and left. So there's no office for her to go to even when things start back up. So she's now working from home. I work from home. So this thing is going, even when it lifts for us on some level, it's still going to feel like we're working, we're still kind of at home. So it's a weird time. It's a weird time for sure.
Yeah, the weather thing, it's been such shitty weather too here in the East Coast. We're actually supposed to get possibly a couple inches of snow tomorrow, which, so we're going to be on the same boat as you, where it's going to be super confusing. It's like, well, I already don't know what freaking day it is from one day to another.
I know.
And I've been doing my best to be in a routine and wake up early, but my sleeping habits have been so fucked up. I'll wake up every single night. I'll wake up at like 2, 3 in the morning after, I would go to bed late anyways, like 11 or midnight, and then I'll just sleep for a couple hours, and I'll be up till like 7 in the morning. This morning I was up till I wanted to get a workout in like real early. I'm like, I need to get myself back on a schedule. So like every other day I'll do it. I'll wake up super early. I'll wake up at 6, and I'll be like ready to go, and then I'll wake. I don't know, it just fucks me up because in the middle of the night, instead of just like, don't find something interesting to watch,
yeah,
I'll be searching on YouTube or whatever. I'm like, hey, Ben Swan has a new video I haven't seen yet. Or that, let me rewatch that James Corbett video. And next thing you know, I'm like up all night. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I mean, what time is it? Like last night I got deep into the Rogan podcast, with Tom O'Neill. Have you seen that one yet?
I saw that it's up, but I haven't watched it yet.
Are you familiar with who he is? Tom?
No, he looked familiar to me, but I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Chaos, and it is the first time in a long time that Joe Rogan has had somebody who's truly somebody that we would have on our show. For a lack of I guess that would be the best way of describing it. It would be somebody who that he would have on our show. I mean, Tim Dillon was on there not too long ago, and a lot of people were giving Rogan shit. And I actually listened to some of it just because I was seeing how people were giving him shit about like the way he was reacting to Tim Dillon. Bringing up the whole Bill Gates thing.
Yeah.
And it does piss me off because it's like, dude, like you let people come on here all the time and say things. He had freaking Dr. Hortez or whatever his name is, the vaccine dickhead. And
yeah, he's a dickhead. He's had that guy on 3 or 4 times. He's had Mike Baker from the CIA on. He's had Barry Weiss on, who's just a reprehensible journalist. So I mean, he's had some establishment creeps on there. And I saw that interview when Tim was talking about Bill Gates, and Joe is very dismissive of him. Get out of here with that. Bill Gates is out to, do.
Well, he also said, he's like, oh, well, you shouldn't bring it up if you don't have the facts or something like that, something along those lines. And Tim's like, well, he's like, it's not my job to know every single detail and every single fact. I mean, a lot of times when I'm sure you probably have a similar experience where if I watch a documentary or if I read an article and it's a long article, I mean, one thing I've always sucked at is reading something once and being able to hold all that information. Like I'll be getting it while I read it. And then what sticks with me isn't all that specific information. It's the outcome of reading all of it. So it's like what I remember is like, holy shit, there's some legit ties. Like this all makes sense. There's some legit ties to Fauci and the vaccine initiative, Bill Gates and all that stuff. I'm like, oh shit, there's some. But if somebody's like, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and somebody says, well, what are the exact ties, or what are I might stumble and I might not be able to remember where I read that or what were the exact ties, but it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that like, okay, I read some stuff that made sense. I came to this outcome, and what's truly important is that outcome. It's like what I've learned from it, not memorizing the information for memorizing's sake. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Daniele Bagnelli. He used to be on the Rogan podcast quite often. He has the podcast History on Fire and the Drunken Taoist. And I remember he was one of the first guests I ever had on. And I remember he used to say this all the time, and it's so true. He's like, we would talk about how like memorizing information for the sake of just memorizing information is completely worthless. Like it's completely pointless. If you're just regurgitating stuff just to sound smart, or you're just regurgitating stuff to I don't know, to show off that like, hey, I know all these names and dates or whatnot, but it doesn't help you understand it, like yourself or the world around you or anything like that, then what's the point of just knowing information for knowing information's sake? Like, so the thing is like linking that to what I'm talking about, when you read something and you learn something and what you learn from it is much more important than memorizing all those specific pieces of information. So the fact that he was busting Tim Dillon's balls about, you know, oh, well, you shouldn't. It's like, first of all, Rogan would never say that to many other guests. You know, it's one of those things where he's always a tad harder on somebody like Eddie Bravo or somebody like, you know, or Tim Dillon, which I think a little bit also is he's close enough with those guys where he feels comfortable, kind of you know, kind of busting their balls because they're friends and whatnot. But I feel like many times like he'll say things and he'll kind of dismiss. He's like, remember, people, like I'm a comedian, like I'm gonna get shit wrong, like don't take me that seriously. Well, Tim Dillon's also a comedian, so you know what? If he says something, and the other thing too is like this whole Bill Gates thing has been talked about so much. Like, has anybody done any research who's denying that he's pushing the vaccine agenda? Because there's so many fucking videos out there, and there's so many like great articles, and you know, Robert Kennedy's been talking about it, Robert Kennedy Jr. Like, there's been so many people writing great articles, doing great videos. Spiro's been doing some great videos on it. Like, it doesn't take much to do a little bit of research and realize, like, okay, there is something there. Like, I almost feel like the majority of people who are saying that, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, blah, 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 then I'm like, they really haven't taken the time to look into it at all, like at all. And if you do look into it, you realize like, holy shit, like there's something there. Like they're not just connecting dots that are very far from one another, but they're very close. And it's not, you're not taking this huge leap to assume that he has this agenda. So yeah, it was bothersome when he had this recent guest on, Tom, I'm calling him it's Tom O'Neill, the author and journalist. He actually went, I mean, he's so well researched. And even Tom, like during one of the moments in a podcast, he's like, wait, I don't want to just tell you my conclusion or tell you this part of the story without telling you all the context and all the details to it, because if I do, then I'm going to sound fucking crazy. And that's the thing. Most people who are well researched, like yourself and myself and James Corbett, or even, you know, Tim Dillon seems to be like really well researched too. I remember
he knows this,
yeah, he knows his shit. And like, if you just say what the conclusion is, like, hey, I think there's this agenda, or I think, and you don't go into all the details on why you think that, then yeah, on the surface value, it's going to seem a little loony. But you know, that's why even that author, he knew that. He's like, listen, if I just said, you know, Manson family, Charles Manson was connected to CIA, was connected to this, was connected to that, you know, the hippie movement, connection with the CIA, all this stuff. Like, if I just say this stuff and I don't tell you how I came up with this conclusion, it's gonna sound nuts. But once you look at the undeniable evidence, then it'd be like, okay, I get it. This guy really knows the names, the dates, the people, you know, he's done his investigation. And I think that's some of the problem with having some of these conversations is you have a conversation with somebody who is completely like a white belt. You just can't get them to consume enough. Well, first of all, it's hard to get them to where you are. So it's like, it would take a lot of like backtracking and filling in with this connection and that connection. And, you know, it's not like you and I, if you bring up Alan Dulles, like, I know who you're talking about. There's people we could talk to about the Warren Commission or talk about, you know, the CIA and bring up Alan Dulles and like, who the fuck's Alan Dulles? So it's like, oh, now I got to fill you in on Alan Dulles and his, you know, sketchy background. It's like, so sometimes it's just, it's ignorance. It's just a fact. It's just a matter of like, oh, you haven't done the research. And that's why this stuff seems so far-fetched. But when you actually dive deep into it, then you realize like, holy shit, there's like like history's full of conspiracies. Like there's, there's what, it's not just when people label somebody conspiracy theorist, it's like they assume they're not well researched. And it's like, no, they're some of the most researched people because, you have to get the dots to connect the dots. And a lot of times the reason why a conspiracy theory sticks around for so long is because where there's smoke, there's fire, and there is something there. There is enough evidence where it seems possible, and that's what keeps stuff alive. It's not because there's nothing there. I feel like, Bigfoot it's not a conspiracy theory that people really entertain that, in a serious manner. Sorry, Midnight Mike, give Midnight Mike's thing. But it just, I think it's one of those things where, but when you talk about these historical things like MK Ultra, you talk about, Project Artichoke, Bluebird, all this stuff, or Blue Beam or whatever. Which there's a Bluebird and a Blue Beam, I believe, right? Yeah, I confuse the two sometimes. But like these things actually happened, and these things, for example, in the Rogan podcast, Tom was saying, he's like, if a whistleblower never talked about MK Ultra and got it, investigated, because all the files were either destroyed or locked up, he's like, it would be just conspiracy theory. Nobody would ever know, or it'd be worse than a conspiracy theory, because a conspiracy theory means that somebody's has a little piece of evidence to come up with that conclusion. It'd be worse than a conspiracy theory because it would be completely unknown. Like they would have done something that's so fucked up, and illegally using American citizens as rat experiments, and yet like nobody would ever know. It would just be completely. So how much goes on that we don't even, like, we're not even close to understanding. And that's the thing about what's going on today, is the fact that it seems like similar to 9/11 or JFK, where there's so much information and there's so many weird connections and so many layers to the story that it takes a long period of time to start connecting those dots and figuring out what's really going on and seeing the agenda play out. I mean, right after 9/11, it wasn't quite clear, that they wanted to go to war in Iraq specifically, or maybe Afghanistan or whatever. So it's like sometimes it takes time to see the agenda play out. But like you said, similar to 9/11, if we're having this conversation right after 9/11, there's a lot of people who look at us like, you guys are fucking crazy, until they can look back at it and say, you know what, it didn't play out the way they said it was going to play out. And it didn't make any sense that they went to a country that had no connection to the thing that got us emotionally so angry that we felt like we needed to go to a country. And I think the similar thing's going to happen now.
Yeah, I do too. And it's, oh man. Well, the nice thing about the Rogan podcast format, or a format like this, is that you can get into a deep, detailed explanation about something. And so you're not limited to being on, MSNBC, and you have a 3-minute segment and you're trying to explain MK Ultra to somebody. I mean, you'd be like, the CIA is involved in mind control. And you're like, they're like, get the fuck out of here. And you're like, no, let me explain, blah, blah, blah. They're like, next, coming up, we're going to commercial. And you're like, you're done. And so there's no way you can have that conversation, even if it was allowed, which it wouldn't be. So you have to have a sort of format that you can unpack complex ideas and reference other events that happen and bring that in. And, and Rogan sets up a format where you can do that. So it's smart of that guy to explain to not just rush into an answer when the setup for that answer, as he knows, is probably more important. Because if you just say, yeah, man, the CIA was working on mind control, and leave it at that, which is a fact, by the way, as you know. But if you just drop that on someone without the proper context, it would be dismissed as ludicrous and, just some sort of, active imagination. So what else is out there that, we talk about things like, oh, well, this could be the setup for forced vaccinations. Now, if somebody just hears that, they may look at us and say, well, that sounds crazy. And maybe just on the surface, I might agree with it. But when you understand the backstory and you know that the government, your friend might say, oh, the government would never just forcibly inject you with something that they don't know, whether it hurt you or not. You go, let's talk about the Tuskegee Airmen Let's talk about the Guatemalans that they infected with syphilis, that Johns Hopkins Hospital was behind that. So, excuse me if I'm this conspiracy theorist who's speculating that they might go to forced vaccinations. Everything that they've been talking about points to that. But you can't have a 2-minute conversation about that with somebody without looking totally unhinged. But if you explain the backstory and you let people know, you have to get into a discussion of who the CDC is and that they're actually a vaccine company that owns patents on all these vaccines that they put on the schedule and they make billions of dollars doing it. If you don't have any of that information and you don't know who Bill Gates is and you don't know what he's done with his work with Gavi in India, where they've been thrown out of the country for paralyzing 500,000 kids, then you would maybe, when Tim Dillon brings up, I think Bill Gates is a bad guy, you might go to, well, I always see him being kind of geeky and with his sweater and his glasses, kind of like me, talking about things and speculating. He's got all this money and he seems like a nice guy and he's out to try and you may buy that PR story. But I would say that the Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation PR machine is running a playbook out of the Rockefellers when they started the Rockefeller Foundation as an attempt to change the PR surrounding them, because they were hated at the time that they started the Rockefeller Foundation, and they used that as a vehicle to get themselves public relations points, and so that they were viewed differently. And the Gates Foundation and all that stuff, the Gates Foundation is an evil organization. I've been screaming this for years. Nobody seems to listen to me. They think I'm out of my mind. And I wish I was wrong. And I wish that this stuff wasn't happening. But when Bill Gates made his appearance in this whole COVID-19 thing, I just kept turning to the people around me saying, I told you so. I told you this guy's going to come out of nowhere. This guy's a bad guy. And what they're doing is no good. What they're simulating is, but it's a full discussion about that without sounding crazy. Because if Tim just brings that up to Joe and they talk about just in a quick thing and Joe just is dismissive of it, I know Tim knows the details of who Bill Gates is and what he's doing. I think he probably just didn't want to get into an argument with Joe Rogan on Joe's show. You know what I mean? Because that could turn people against him. And Tim's a comedian and he's growing his audience and he's funny as fuck too. By the way, if you're not following Tim Dillon on Twitter, dude, you are missing out, because he is hysterical. And he's got a background in conspiracies too. He knows this stuff too. He just doesn't go down when he's doing mainstream stuff. He doesn't go into it too deep. But you listen to him talk to Sam Tripoli about these things, and man, they will go down the rabbit hole. And he did the whole episode on Tinfoil Hat on the smiley face killer. So that, he knows what he's talking about, and he wants to get into it. But I don't think Joe wants to get into that stuff as much anymore. Maybe he wasn't high enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there is a part of where, like I was saying with my cousin who passed away, like there was a little bit of like hesitate where I'm like, fuck, did I say something that, maybe I shouldn't have? And so, I mean, that's like a small sample size example, because it's one direct conversation with this one person. And in Joe, his experience, his show, his podcast, with his experience, I mean, he's affecting thousands, millions of people's lives and perspectives. So if he gives advice, if he says something, then I can see like the anxiety or the pressure of like, okay, I better be careful what I say, because now because as much as he wants to pretend he doesn't understand how much of an impact he's having, I think it's gotten so big and he's constantly being told how influential his show is that now he's like acknowledging it a bit, and so I can see like, even for myself, like when I talk about vaccines, like, and that's why I say I practice what I preach. Like I'm not telling you like, I'm not saying, hey, don't vaccinate your kids, but yet I've never had kids and I've never had to make that decision to put me in the position where it's like, okay, do I truly fucking believe my research, or am I just saying this shit? But my kids aren't vaccinated and they're healthy as all hell. They've never had any serious health issues whatsoever. And same thing with this coronavirus thing. Like I've been going to the parks with the kids as much as I can until they start caution taping everything. Actually, all afternoon today, I was putting together a basketball hoop because they took down all the basketball hoops, and I'm like, fuck this. I'm like, I'm gonna buy one. So I ended up putting one together today, and it was just, I'm completely okay with like people come over my house. Like I'm not, you know, I'm practicing what I preach. The things I say I truly believe. But I do wonder sometimes, like, okay, if I had a platform as big as his, would I be a little bit more nervous? Would I make maybe want to make sure that I'm more than 100% sure about something before I share it? But at other times, we've talked about, like he has other shitheads on the show, and he's more than willing to like spew bullshit, with them. So it's like, but that's also the more accepted mainstream narrative perspectives where I guess the stuff that he kind of tries to stray away from is stuff that, but he's talked about like how he'll never. I forget who I was listening to recently and talked to that it was like a small snippet from an interview, and he was saying how he wouldn't have any more politicians on because he's like, oh, they're all fucking dirty. He's like, it's because when he had Bernie on and how they took that out of context, and I know he said that he's been like contacted by just about every politician to be on the show, and they don't give a fuck about his podcast. They care about the power of his podcast, the fact that it's influential. And so I mean, I think that he definitely, when you become that big, there is some concern about who's listening and how much influence you have. But you know what? Like, to me, that's even I want to believe that if I had a platform that big, I'd only be more outspoken, and I'd only be more, I would not be holding back. I'd probably be more Alex Jones than I would be Joe Rogan. In regards to, as your platform gets bigger, I'd probably get a little crazier, because not crazier, but the fact that I know that I could get people to go down that rabbit hole by bringing something up, like that's so fucking important, because in all aspects of life, if it comes down to, big, medicine, the chemicals that are in our foods, all this stuff, like we're being lied to and deceived in so many different ways, that if I can help somebody kind of get a better understanding of the world around them and help them in the process of I guess, for lack of a better term, becoming woke, right? And if I can help with that journey, then absolutely I would. So I guess I'm contradicting myself. Like I understand both perspectives. I understand the perspective that if somebody had a platform that big, maybe the concern of like, okay, what if I say something stupid, and if out of context somebody takes it, like you constantly hear about the Sandy Hook example. Sandy Hook was brought up, and then people, or the Pizzagate, even better example because it's more recent. The Pizzagate example, where somebody went there with a gun, and because they believed this so much, and so I think stories like that does concern somebody like Rogan, because it's like, okay, if I was that person who's saying, no, without a doubt this is going on there, and now I'm influencing some shithead to go in there and like do something crazy, like pull out a gun in a public place, I get that concern. But I also think that you can't go completely in the other direction, where you completely ignore all this stuff. I think there is a responsible way of having these discussions, like maybe not the Alex Jones way, where he's a little over the top, but talk about the stuff that you can prove. Talk about the stuff that without a doubt, I remember when Alex Jones was on his show and they talked about Pizzagate, right? This was something that he completely dismissed, Joe Rogan. And then like they're going through the emails and he's like, yeah, that is kind of fucking weird. Like what, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like his Instagram page is weird. Like these are things that are undeniable. It doesn't mean that without a doubt, that's what was going on at the pizza place. But it does mean there's some fucking weird shit. Like there's definitely more than meets the eye. That, in other words, like it wasn't like there was nothing there. Like people were coming up with these theories or these conclusions based on complete nothing. Like if you read those emails, if you see the pictures of that was on his Instagram page, you can't deny that that's not fucking weird. You have an Instagram page. I have an Instagram page. I don't have anything even close to that weird on my Instagram page. It's pictures of what I've ate and like my kids and like, I don't know, my car. That's about it. I don't have any weird, children, doing some weird dark art tied up nonsense. So it's like when you look into it, you realize like, okay, I can see why people think this. Like even if you think that they're wrong, at least if you look into it, you can be like, okay, I can see how they came up with this conclusion.
Yeah. Did you watch that documentary lately? Out of the Shadows, or I think that's what it's called.
Oh, the one. Yeah. Robbie Martin. I started watching. I think I watched like 75% of it, And is that the one? It talks about the media. It was the filmmaker or the stunt guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And I did. And you know what? I'm like, you know what? I got like 50% through it, 75% through it. And then the next day I see Robbie Martin say that like this is complete QAnon, nonsense or something along those lines, like saying
Mhm.
that he can't believe that so many people are but I'm like, what I've seen, I'm like, maybe I wouldn't agree with this guy's political views on everything, or maybe I would disagree with them with some things. But I'm like,
Mhm.
when you're
Mhm.
talking about stuff like COINTELPRO, when you're talking about MK Ultra, I mean, he was pretty on point with all that stuff. I mean, he was
Yeah,
sharing
yeah.
a lot of information that I think even Robbie Martin would be like, yeah, those are real things
Yeah.
that I think are a great way of getting people to realize like, holy shit, like there was some shady stuff happening, and hopefully the stuff that happens currently would be more believable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Liz Crokin who's in it is like, if I recall correctly, I think she's sort of like a Q person. So that might have been where he got the Q thing from. And it was put together by Tiffany Fitzhenry, and I don't think she's in that Q world. But yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, it was like I had people telling me you should watch it. You'll know all the stuff that's in it already, but you should still watch it just in case. And so I did. And I thought it was well done. I mean, I thought it was well produced for sure. And I thought that, the information in there was like a good it was good for the people that are new to this sort of world. If they're unfamiliar with I mean, they could have done just the whole show just on Hollywood, but they didn't. They went into some of the they went into different aspects of that, and then they got into Pizzagate as well towards the end. And I thought it was good for people that are just coming into the information. That'll give them a pretty broad understanding of it, and then allow them to then take that information, if they're interested, go dig a little bit deeper into some of the topics. But the topics they were talking about were all real topics. I mean, MK Ultra and the influence that Hollywood has, or the CIA has in Hollywood, and Operation Mockingbird, and the Pizzagate component with a high level elite sexual pedophilia ring going on. All these things are real. Um, but if you don't know about it, and it's the first time you're hearing it, that show could have been like overwhelming for people. I can understand why it got millions of hits, but I could also see. I had a conversation with Jason Goodman about this yesterday, or maybe it was the day before yesterday. He does a show called Crowdsource the Truth, and he's been into all these things. And his take on it, and he knows Tiffany Fitzhenry really well because they've done a show together. His take on it was that it seemed more like a limited hangout, like it didn't go deep enough for his taste. And I was like, well, I can get that. I mean, I can understand that. He's like, it didn't go into this and it didn't go into that and everything. I said, well, I don't know that it was really trying to go into the depths that it needed to. I mean, because each one of those components could be its own series, let alone just documentary. I mean, you could do a 10-part Netflix special on the CIA's involvement in the media, and do all that. So I don't know that there's something that has to be edited out at some point. You can't make it a 17-hour documentary. So I didn't agree with Jason on that point, but I did think it was a good movie to kind of get people's feet wet on some of these more disturbing topics. It's undeniable to anybody that's paying attention that Hollywood is a really weird, dirty place. I lived in LA for 20 years, and I didn't work in Hollywood, but I knew Hollywood people. I know actors and things like that. I know really famous actors, and they, they're weirdos to begin with. They're actors. There's something they'll admit. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but there's something unnatural about playing another character, playing different people your entire life. It's something very detached from reality about that in general. And then you have all the competition to make it in Hollywood. You got to make it. So am I surprised that there are people fucking Harvey Weinstein to get to the top? Absolutely not. Am I surprised that a Hollywood producer like that is a total creep? No, I assume they all are. So some of this stuff wasn't really new, but it's I think anything that helps the general population take a look at this world in a more skeptical way, and really sort of see that there is a plan behind some, the Hollywood agenda. It looks disjointed on the surface. You don't put everything together. But when you dig into the background of Disney and all the Disney executives that have been arrested for pedophilia and all the subliminal messages that they have in all their stuff, look, it's undeniable. There's something weird going on. Now, you may say that it doesn't matter or that it's not all that important, but they think it's important. They think it's important enough to add it to their films and to encode these messages in there and all these things. So on some level, somebody thinks it's important. So we're all kind of waking up to this. I think we've been programmed to just not really dig too deep into the backstory of some of these people or some of these events or some of these corporations. But man, because maybe you don't want to know that Disney is a reprehensible corporation. They are, maybe you just want to go, oh, I just want to watch Lion King, but if you have the appetite and the time and the inclination, you can go down some of these rabbit holes on these companies that we invite into our homes and realize, oh no, there are some people running them that do not have the best interest of us in mind.
Well, I mean, I'm wearing a Marvel shirt. What about that guy who did all the Marvel movies? I mean, what the fuck was his name? The filmmaker that
James
had
Gunn?
No. The one that was accused of having a bunch of young kids.
Oh yeah, Bryan Singer.
Singer, yes. He that was kind of like well known. He would have like young boys hanging out at his house and parties and.
No, he settled multiple lawsuits with young boys that he had done horrible things to. The guy is a pedophile. There's a lot of that in Hollywood, and unfortunately, I mean, you see all the Disney girls that come through the Mickey Mouse Club, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, and all of the Ariana Grande and the ones that have major psychological problems that are like going off the reservation now, and Jessica Simpson's all fucked up and all these people. And you go, we put them on this pedestal and everyone wants to be like, all the little girls want to be like them and everything. Boy, I don't think they would want to be like them if they knew what they had to go through to get to that point. It's a dirty business.
Well, I also think they lose respect for themselves because they become like just a piece of meat where they're like, hey, we're going to dress you up as skimpy as possible. We're going to have songs or, have you sing songs that just are all sexually referencing, sexual things. They're going to stimulate people and whatnot. And you become like this. I mean, you watch some Rihanna videos and it's like, it might as well be I might as well be at a strip club. Like, You're really giving me a lap dance in this music video. It's like so you figure you're constantly doing that. Like it's every music video is the same formula. Every song is some type of sexual undertone to it, some provocative lyrics or whatnot. Like you're basically become just a puppet, and it's just like, oh yeah, well this is what you got to do to become big. I think it was the singer of the lead singer of the Pussycat Dolls that some years ago had an interview about how she said, because I mean she was as pretty, if not prettier, and more talented than some of the girls that became more popular than her. But she's I think during the interview she talked about how she wasn't willing to sell her soul. Some of the things that they were asking her to do, she wasn't willing to do. And I think when you look at Beyonce, Rihanna, I mean, we look at like some of the biggest artists. They're artists that are basically like, I don't. If you look at their portfolio of work and their music videos and their songs, like I'm not sure they've ever said no to anything being too raunchy or being too, So it's like they don't have any boundaries. So it's like they're just like, oh, this is gonna make me more money. Oh, this is gonna make me more famous. Then okay, that's fine, And maybe in some cases they've been brainwashed to say like, hey, this is what you want. This will bring you happiness. If you can be the biggest star in the world, just all you have to do is do this. And little by little, you're probably losing a little respect for yourself, and other people are losing some respect for you. So it's it's disturbing. But like you said, a lot of this stuff it's an open secret. Just like that documentary. I had a Matthew Valentis, who was one of the guys involved with that documentary. It was called A Open Secret because these pedophilia parties in Hollywood was a open secret. It's not something that's secretive or unknown to the majority of the public. Most people who hang out with these, really popular filmmakers and directors and celebrities, they know this stuff's happening. It just like you said, the Weinstein thing, like that wasn't a surprise to many people. It wasn't a surprise at all. So I think the problem with having these type of discussions with people is that the majority of the time people just haven't fucking looked into it. Like that's the thing that drives me nuts. It's so often that I'm having a discussion with somebody, and like 5 minutes into it, I'm like, or 5 seconds into it, I know that like, holy fuck, they haven't looked into this at all. Like, because like it sounds hard to believe only because you haven't looked into it. If you actually looked into it, you realize like this shit isn't hard to believe at all. There's pretty good evidence that to make this factional. So to me, it is frustrating, and I think a movie like the one you're referring to, that kind of touches on a lot of different topics, is good because, okay, one thing, they share one thing and you're like, okay, that's kind of fucking crazy. And then another thing, you're like, well, that's fucking crazy. And then it starts adding up. You're like, holy fuck, all this stuff's true or seems true. And, it makes you rethink everything. Like, holy fuck, is anything in this world true and real, or am I being deceived by everything and anything? So I think, documentaries like that. There's another one called Ethos, which is pretty good. It's an older one with Woody Harrelson actually narrating it. That's really good. I had the filmmaker Pete McGrain on my show years ago. And documentaries like that, Zeitgeist, I think, did a good job of like, even though Zeitgeist afterwards, they kind of like, everybody that was a part of the movement, like they never wanted to talk about 9/11. They didn't want to talk about conspiracy theories. Well, let's just talk about, the future and how, what the future we want to build. But it seemed like a lot of times, Peter, and I can see why, because unfortunately anybody who was a truther, you almost feel like maybe people wouldn't take you seriously if they thought that you were this conspiracy theorist and you wanted people to take you seriously. So there's always that concern of like, well, I don't want to be lumped in with them, not because I think they're wrong, but just because I'm worried about people not hearing me out when I talk about other topics also. So I think that's always a concern. People like you and I, we're always like, I don't give a fuck. I'll talk about all of it, and I'm willing, things off.
Yeah. You gotta know your audience, right? If you've like I have mentioned many times this, that I made the mistake of bringing up 9/11 at a Thanksgiving dinner table years and years ago. And I just watched the table just turn. Like you could just, the energy just changed and everyone just was hating me for bringing it up. And they didn't want to talk about it and they didn't know about it. And they looked at me as being like disloyal or un-American or all these things. I mean, it was just it was like a psychological study in like what brainwashed looks like. And I realized that you have to know your audience. You have to make sure that you don't go down that path. Like you said, after talking to a guy for 5 seconds or 5 minutes, you realize, okay, this is somebody, I'm not even going to have I can't even have a conversation with this person, let alone a debate, because the debate I'll have to explain it'd be like having a debate against somebody that's totally unarmed, or having a gunfight against somebody that didn't have a gun. I can't go back and explain the backstory to everything to you. It would take too long. But I also don't expect people to trust me. I would never say to somebody, just trust me and don't look into it, because I'm all about looking into it. I want everybody to look into it. So I've found that sometimes I've just had to if I want to kickstart, if I want to get into that conversation with somebody, I've had to say something along the lines of, hey, so what do you think about this lockdown going on for 4 months, even though it doesn't seem, even though the numbers don't add up? What is your take on that? Instead of telling them what my take is on it, I've sometimes felt like I could, if I ask the question to them and put the ball in their court and ask them to verbalize it, then they might say something, and then their answer might come out, and I'll say, but doesn't that seem funny? And then they will go, oh yeah, I guess it does. I never really thought of that, And so I make sure that they are participating in the conversation so that it doesn't turn into a lecture from me trying to lecture them, because nobody likes that. And it comes across as condescending and everything. And, so when we get into topics, you and I can just jump in and just get weird. But a lot of other people, I find myself going Eddie Bravo and just going, just look into it. just look into, like, I don't have the time to explain it to you. Look into it. You'll see what I'm talking about. And a lot of times they don't look into it because they don't really have the interest in doing that. They want to have an opinion on something, which is fine because we've all got our opinions on things, but they want to have an opinion on it. And if I want to challenge that opinion, then there typically isn't much behind it. It's just sort of, well, this is just the way I feel about it. Like, okay, I understand you feel that way, but let me tell you what some of the facts are behind it. And maybe you'll feel differently once I present facts, because what the media does to us is tells us how to feel. They don't tell us how to think. They don't tell us the facts. They don't tell us everything we need to know about a situation and then say, make up your own mind. They say, this is how you should feel about it. And so you take that emotion out there and you feel that way, and you get into debates with people and you feel that way. But if someone challenges you and says, I understand you feel that way, but why do you feel that way? Do you know about this, X, Y, and Z? No, I didn't know that. Well, if you knew that, now would you feel that way? Maybe not. So a lot of times we're coming into an argument with someone armed with facts, and they're coming into the argument armed with feelings. And it's a weird kind of debate to have, because the feelings part is just very surface and there's not much more to it. It's just, I saw an ad or I saw a news broadcast or I read an article and it made me mad about this topic. But you don't know if the article you read is written by Barry Weiss, who's got an axe to grind or he's got some agenda, or if it's written by Max Boot, who's a neocon scumbag, and he's writing about how, we got to do whatever we can to defend Israel and everything. And you're like, yeah, but do you know that this guy's like a hardcore Zionist, like Israel firster, who was a member of the Project for a New American Century? So you read his article and now you feel the way he feels, but do you know who this guy even is? No. Okay, we'll see. Then we have to have a conversation about that. So it becomes exhausting at some point.
Yeah, no, it does, because like you said, you have to explain everything, and because they haven't looked it up, they're looking at you like they're skeptical, and it's like, wait. I'm telling you, this is historical. Like, these are historical events. These are historical records. These are things you can look up. These are real people. These are real connections, and I think the other thing is, like, a lot of times they're looking at you like you're the only one who believes this shit, and it's like, no, like, there's people who've actually done real research on this who aren't me, just somebody who does a podcast. They're people who have spent their life work looking into the CIA, and MK Ultra, looking into whatever it may be, some proxy war during some historical time, like whatever it may be. I'm like, there's people who actually look into this, and I think what conspiracy theorists do is that a lot of times we connect the dots. It's like, yeah, we look at this one good because to be really good or really well informed on any one topic, it has to consume your life. Like, I was talking about Tom O'Neill, like he was talking about the last 20 years, whatever it was, that he spent just working on this one book, and like he just was all in, super deep into it, and there was so much to it that, like, there was a lot of other stuff that he just didn't have time to go down that rabbit hole, and that because he was in this rabbit hole and he's focusing. So his research in regards to like the Manson family, the CIA, the MK Ultra, like, he's one of the guys you go to, and he's super fascinating and well researched in regards to that. So a conspiracy theorist might go into his research, take some tidbits and take things that you really like and connect it to somebody else's research, and you start connecting these dots. And one thing that I find all the time when I'm researching stuff and consuming articles and documentaries and podcasts, interviews, whatever it may be, I can see like, oh shit, I remember that one thing I read. Now that makes more sense because of what this guy's saying about this. Mm-hmm. And it's like you start connecting the dots in your head. Yeah. And I love that aspect of it. I almost feel like a private investigator. I can see why somebody who's a detective or investigator loves their job. Yeah. Because it's like it's so much fun, like when things start making sense. When like, okay, this alone, okay, that kind of makes sense. Okay, why is this relevant? And then it's like, holy shit, that person's connected to that person. I mean, perfect example, right? Just recently, I've been having tons of issues with all my social media accounts with sharing my personal, the rippleeffectpodcast.com and my YouTube channel. Like, it'll say that a link I'm attempting to share, it doesn't follow their guidelines or whatnot. So I have to like post my post without the link, then go back, edit it, and then add the link, and that seems to bypass it. But other articles, right, other stuff I've been sharing, I've been getting these pop-ups on Facebook saying this third party fact check this this thing you're sharing, and it's saying that it's not fact. I don't know what the term they actually use, if they called it it's conspiracy, or say it's not factual, whatever they say, but they basically say that it's bullshit, this article that I'm sharing. Well, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, some of these things that I'm sharing are, some of them have been opinions in pretty mainstream publications. I'm like, but it's, you see the consistency of like, okay, it's anything that's kind of pushing back against the mainstream narrative. Ben Swan just released a video, I think yesterday or today. I watched it actually this afternoon, in regards to the woman who works for the company that's fact checking this, and fact checking all the COVID-19 possible links to the Wuhan lab. She worked at the Wuhan lab. He has her name. He has, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, are you fucking? And then the fact that like this exists, the fact that this is a real thing, that the person who is saying that any links to this lab is a conspiracy theory or whatnot, is like, the fact that the person who's doing that fact checking, who was hired to do the fact checking, actually worked there, is so fucking crazy that that
it can't be accidental.
Yeah, it can't be accidental. And how can people hear that, see that connection, and not completely throw their hands up and say, holy fuck, I can't believe anything? Like, to me, it's like, there's so many of these type of situations where you're like, okay, maybe they're just trying to filter out bad information. Maybe that is their intentions, but because they're fucking idiots and them themselves haven't looked into it, they think this stuff is a conspiracy theory. But then you see these links, you're like, I wish it was just dumb ignorance, but it's not. It's way more dangerous. It's way more evil. Yeah. These fuckers are doing it on purpose, and that stuff is. I mean, look at it. Your podcast is on the David Icke channel. I mean, look at all the shit's going on with David Icke. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Brian Rose said himself, like, he's an older man who has a opinion. He didn't tell anybody to be violent or do anything that was harmful to anybody. Why is he so dangerous that you completely, boycotted him, banned him from YouTube? I mean, it's complete nonsense. And it only proves to you that there's something there, that there's something that they're worried about.
Yeah. And ironically, David Icke wrote a book called Dot Connector. So he's been one of those guys connecting dots. And the more stories you and I read, or people that are interested in these things like us, the more stories or articles or topics that we get into, the more dots we have on our map that we're able to connect. So when something comes up, it rings a bell to us. And it's not to say that we know everything or every topic, but we have an understanding of a broad array of these conspiratorial topics. So when somebody brings up one thing, we can tie it to something that is seemingly disjointed. It has no connection because of the person involved. Let's say that they mentioned this, and then they mentioned something else, and we go, "Did you know that George Soros financed both of those?" And you go, "No, that makes sense now." So sometimes these dot connecting exercises are really helpful because you have information that I don't have, and I have information that somebody else doesn't have, and somebody mentions a name in a conversation, or reads an article in a conversation, or reads an article and a name comes out, and it means nothing to them, but it might mean something to us. Like, we might recognize that name, like Whitney Webb. Okay, so you and I both had Whitney on our shows, and Whitney just did a really good piece on Jerome Hauer and how this dude that's a name I didn't recognize, but she's like, this is a guy that shows his face in the Dark Winter simulation in 2001, and also has ties to the newer version of Event 201, and some of these other people involved as well, and Johns Hopkins. So this ability to stretch out over 19 years from one event to another and connect those dots is something that just comes with a lot of it comes with time of knowing these things. And Whitney is one of the best at doing this. And of course, as soon as I put her interview on, I went to number 2 on Apple Podcasts and their government section from that interview because it just spiked. It just went crazy because everyone wanted to hear what she had to say about it because she's right. She's on it, and she's a dot connector too. And as far as David Icke goes, and yeah, I've got
James Corbett. I think she's like the female gay James Corbett, really.
And I mentioned James to her, and she's like, I think James is the best. I do too. She's like the female James Corbett. It's funny, and she's as likable and nice as him. Because I'm sure you probably do too. That we end our interview, it's over, and then we're chatting for a half an hour. And same with James. When we had James on, it was like, we hang up and then we got a million things to talk about after the fact. So I kind of wish I'd been recording the nonsense afterwards because it was just as interesting as the interview. But David Icke, back to that, I like my show appears on Iconic, which is David Icke's video platform, which is censorship free. But they went after that platform too because the videos are hosted on Vimeo. I don't understand the technology behind it all, but the videos play on Iconic through Vimeo. And so they went after Vimeo and had Vimeo take the whole thing down. So they spent a couple of days this last week having to re-upload every single episode onto Iconic onto a different platform. And Jamie Icke, David's son, who runs the company, was just, because he's a smart dude who knows what's going on, he was like, we were already making plans to get off of Vimeo anyway. And we were making plans to do that the following week. So we were already prepared for it. We just had to do the task of uploading everything manually. So I was, we were all off that platform for about 3 days, and now it's back up and running. But that just goes to show you, if you're David Icke and you start taking all this flack, it's usually because you're right over the target. So when he talks about things like, like 5G, as we jokingly had to call it last time around, you know that there are certain buzzwords that'll get you flagged, and David Icke talks about some of those things, and then what do you know? They go crazy, and Ofcom goes and tries to take his channels down and tries to take London Real down, and LinkedIn gets involved and they take Brian Rose down and all this stuff. And if there couldn't be a better advertisement for David Icke being right about the things that he's talking about than to see the reaction of the mainstream media and the government and all those agencies, than to freak out. They still haven't figured it out. And I feel I don't want to give them any ideas, but they still haven't figured out that if you want to make something like this go away, you don't ban it. You don't do that. You did it to Graham Hancock, and he got, 7 million views of his TED Talk, The War on Consciousness. You want to make something a big hit, ban it. That's why I've jokingly said, I hope Amazon bans my book. It'd be the greatest marketing campaign I could ever ask for.
That was actually one of the few times Rogan actually pushed back a little bit, was when Shermer was on there with Graham Hancock, and he really defended Graham Hancock. But I think Graham Hancock is so likable, and he's been a fan. Rogan's been a fan of Graham Hancock since Fingerprints of the Gods, that and he's probably researched it and looked into it and had so many long discussions with Graham Hancock about the whole thing that he couldn't let Shermer just kind of dismiss it as like just silliness, So yeah, I mean, I think that without a doubt, I mean, it tells you something. The 5G thing, I'm still very up in the air about, how dangerous it is. I mean, I talked about it. I haven't even uploaded the podcast yet. I haven't got a chance to, but I had the Google whistleblower Zach on my last podcast, and we were talking about, like, without a doubt, there's people who turn off all their Wi-Fi, all their anything that gives any type of waves or signals off in their house, and their moods change, their quality of sleep change, their health changes. So without a doubt, like, there's a lot of technology that we're just using and accepting that could have some long-term effects that we're not aware of. And even if they're mild, maybe just it being around us over and over again for long periods of time could be dangerous. We don't know. And so it's not like it's not crazy that questioning it. And I mean, I have seen the argument that, like, okay, well, 5G is in limited places, and that they're not really the places where you're seeing the outbreak of the virus. you're not really seeing, you know, a 5G connection there where the hotspots are. But it doesn't have to. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's all of a sudden like 5G is safe. It just means there might not be a connection to the coronavirus, you know. So,
Right.
you know, it doesn't completely dismiss it. I mean, I've been I emailed the guys from, I don't know if you ever listen to Fault Lines on
Oh yeah.
yeah. So you know, I've been in actually Lee is from like my neck of the woods kind of, and I remember me and him being in contact a few times about him coming on the show, and then I called in and we talked about Epstein, and we're kind of bullshitting about the, you know, where he grew up or whatnot. But I've kind of, they're kind of hard to get on because Lee's busy or whatnot. So I kind of put that in the back burner, and I'm like, oh, I'll go back to that eventually. But recently, I emailed him again, and I tweeted actually both of them, and I'm like, and Nixon actually wrote me back, and because I'm like, dude, you guys are, I think you're a little wrong on this coronavirus thing. I don't know if you've been listening to them the last
No,
couple,
I haven't.
but they are completely justifying the quarantining. They're completely all on board with like, this is as dangerous as we've been told. I don't know why everybody's trying to find, you know, this conspiracy theory and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, I'm like, dude, like he's and Lee will get upset when people compare it to the flu. He's like, you know, he's like, it's not the flu. People have to stop saying that it's not the flu. And it's just like, well, maybe you can make the argument that it's more contagious than the flu. But in regards to being as lethal and killing as many people, yeah, you can make the fucking argument that it's the flu. And
Yeah.
even if you make the argument that it's not it's worse than the flu, right? So even if you could some way prove that, which we know for a fact, and both of us, I think we're in agreement that you can't really prove any of it because the numbers are so flawed and the information is so flawed with contaminated tests, with the lack of accuracy. I mean, I've said this to people, like, you can go on the Wikipedia, which is, I mean, you don't get much more mainstream than Wikipedia, and you go to COVID-19 testing, you go down to accuracy, and there's story after story of Chinese tests going to wherever and like giving false positives, these tests going to this other country and giving, and like they found out that like they were like 30% accurate. Like, so I'm like, so what I'm saying is I'm building a foundation on bullshit. I'm like, so the reaction was all based on this information, and if I can prove to you that this information, this data is bullshit, then it means that the reaction is bullshit. It was unjustified. So when you look at the accuracy, you look at the doctors, the whistleblowers, Dr. Ann, I forget what her name is. She's from Montana. She has a video that went viral in regards to like the death certificates and considering deaths by coronavirus, even if it wasn't directly linked to the coronavirus. And the other doctor, the doctor who's also a senator, Scott Jensen Scott, something like that. He's doing a bunch of interviews. He's another one who's like, I've been doing death certificates for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this where they can basically tell you, like, even if you assume or you have, you know, if you think there's a possibility that this is what killed him, then you can, you know, consider that. And then there's also the reimbursement issue too, because they're getting money. Like, the thing about people have to realize, like, where there's money, there's corruption, and there's money everywhere. So there's corruption everywhere.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
You know, in hospitals, it's a for-profit, you know, industry. So if you can, like, if somebody dies, right? Like, think about it from a hospital's perspective, right? If I put on this death certificate, like, okay, the person's already dead. I can't save them now. Either way, the family's going to mourn, but it benefits the hospital in some way. If I put that he died by COVID-19, how would that not be it's something that some people are doing? Like, you can easily justify in your head, like, okay, I didn't cause a death. They died. Maybe the virus didn't cause a death, but if I say they, you know, on this piece of paperwork, if I just write this one little thing, then all of a sudden we can get some more funding from the government. We can get some more respirators. We can get some reimbursements. We can get something financially for free. Then why the fuck wouldn't you? I mean, it's no different why like towns are constantly asking for grants, even for stuff they don't need at times, because they're just trying to get free shit. Like, towns do that all the time. You know, they you know, ask for grants because the grants are available, not because they necessarily need that specific thing, but because the money's there. So it's not, out of the realm of possibility. But my point is like, it's obvious that like all this stuff, all this information. I mean, the graphs, the numbers. I mean, we're fucking way off with how many deaths. You know, and I'm sure everybody's gonna say, well, it's because we've been social distancing. You know, all this stuff. It's like, of course they're gonna say that. But then explain why the flu is still fucking killing people. It's like, and other things are still killing people. It's like other viruses are still going around, and the flu is still killing people. And the flu's numbers, even with a vaccine, you know, that supposedly works, like that's still, I think, after it's all said and done, is going to kill more people than the coronavirus. So how can that be? How can that be? And that's with believing the numbers that they're giving you. And if the tests are wrong, and if doctors are considering certain deaths that weren't directly because of the coronavirus deaths, then even with the bullshit numbers, I think after it's all said and done, the flu's still going to kill more people. So you still couldn't inflate this for. That's why I think after this shit's all said and done, and people look at like the graduations that the kids couldn't have, the athletes that are missing a lot of sports. It's a young man's sport. I mean, you're losing a whole season of your career that you might never get back. And I know these things are kind of not that important, but life's about enjoyment. It's about living it to the max and doing the things you love. And when the government has told you, hey, you can't pursue your fucking dreams, you can't find any enjoyment, like you can't go to the park and even hang out with friends in public because people are going to give you dirty looks or call the cops on you, which you're seeing in some cases. Like, you don't get that fucking time back. Like, these 2 months, you're never going to get back. So it's like, I mean, for podcasters, it's worked out great because everybody seems to be super available lately. And but I mean, outside of that, like, there's a lot of other aspects of this that you're completely stripping people of their ability to live their life to their fullest. To protect who? To protect some old person. Don't get me wrong. Like, we should protect people when we can. But what the fuck? Like, things have been killing old people forever. Like, I'm doing it again. I told you I wasn't going to get worked up, and I can find myself getting worked up.
Well, you know what isn't killing old people? Cancer and heart disease apparently just stopped happening all around the country. Isn't that a miracle? So those things stop, but then all of a sudden this disease just spiked like crazy. Do we think that maybe they're attributing some of these cancer and heart disease related deaths, the number one and number two cause of death in the United States? Do we think, since those numbers have dropped off a cliff, that maybe they're fudging a little bit and taking some of those deaths and putting them over here and calling them coronavirus? And then you start to see the payouts that these hospitals are getting, that if a death is coronavirus related, and you just can't ignore that. You can't ignore it. Not if you're going to have an honest conversation about this, because like you said, where there's money, there's corruption, and there's money everywhere. And if you think that hospitals are somehow exempt from that, you're wrong, because they're looking out for, they're private. It's not public hospitals, they're private hospitals. They need to make money. And if this has shut everything down, but then there's a loophole where they say, well, if these people die and it's on their death certificate as COVID-19, then we send you more stuff and we send you more money. Well, then shit. I can't do any of the elective surgeries and my revenue's falling off a cliff, but if I can label all these things as COVID-19, then I'm going to do it. Like you said, as long as it's not somebody dying in a car accident, then you slap this label on it and go, hey, whatever, what's done is done. I'm not saying you should, but I'm just saying that I can understand how a hospital administrator would view this sort of thing. And, we're in a situation now where we're basing our lives off of these numbers. And whether it's the numbers of people in hospitals, whether it's the number of people dead, whether it's the number of people testing positive with dirty tests and everything, we're making the decisions about how we run this world based off of the numbers. But the problem is the numbers are so unreliable that you can't base anything off of them. So it is reasonable to say that this whole thing is a gigantic scam because we don't know about the actual numbers. Now, if we could get real actual numbers, and I don't even know who I would believe at this point. I'll tell you who I don't believe. the American government, Chinese government, American media, Chinese media, CDC, and the World Health Organization. I take all 6 of those institutions and just flush anything they say down the toilet, or in fact, do the exact opposite of what they say, or interpret it the exact opposite of the way they want me to interpret it, because they've all got massive agendas and they're pathological liars. So you can't trust them. So we're making decisions based on numbers, and we don't even know if the numbers are even remotely close. I just know I don't know anybody that's sick, and I don't know anybody that's died. I'm grateful for that. And I don't, to be clear, I'm not trying to extrapolate that out and say, therefore, nobody's sick and nobody's dying. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that in my little world, I don't know. It's not a real thing for me, but to other people, it's a real thing to them. I just can't get on board with the shutdown, because the people that are telling me that we have to shut down are the least credible people that you could possibly encounter. Guys like Bill Gates and Donald Trump too, and
Gates has said it. He thinks that we shouldn't stop all this until everybody gets a vaccine. Like, first of all,
it's great.
You said in the beginning of this podcast, like how, and I thought about this when you said it, but then we got off track. But you were talking about like you had to be like a doctor to argue with people online. Now, and when the fuck did Bill Gates become a doctor? Because now he's stepped down from Microsoft. He's focusing on health issues, and do people forget his name's not Dr. Bill? Is not Dr. Gates. Like, he's not a fucking doctor. He did, like, when did he become a leading? It's funny because if I debate somebody, I will bring up doctors that I've had on my show, and people like Dr. Tom Cowan, Dr. Brzezinski, whoever it may be that I'm referencing their work or maybe their outlook on something, and people will dismiss it, but nobody's concerned about a fucking guy who doesn't even have a PhD in anything to do with this, and yet, like, he's the one giving advice to, he's giving advice and being very influential to the WHO, to the CDC, to government government departments all over the world. Like, he's being a huge influence on what they do and how they handle health issues. And what the fuck does he know about health issues? Like, when was it acceptable? But yet people give Robert Kennedy Jr. a hard time when this guy was a guy who was a respected environmental activist and sued so many chemical companies and wrote books on so many things, and was a disrespected environmentalist until he talked about vaccines. Then all of a sudden he's not credible anymore. But the pill epidemic kills a lot of fucking people. The thing is, like, what drives me nuts, and I've been so tempted to call fault lines in the morning, but I'm so concerned that I'm going to get worked up and I'm going to have a small segment, and we can't have this type of discussion. That's why I invited these guys on my show. I'm like, I'm not, and I invited them. I told them, hey, they know I'm a fan of the show. I've called in. I've talked to them both via email multiple times. I believe I even still have Nixon's, Nick Garland's cell phone number. We've texted a few times, and I like these guys, but I know that I can't call in that show and have this discussion without probably looking dumb, because by the time I say something, then he has a rebuttal, the segment's over, and now it's like, okay, well, now where the fuck do we stand? Like, you have to have these long discussions. It's I've heard them both, and not just that, many people say, well, what are you saying, that the virus is made up? No, I'm not saying the virus is made up. I'm saying that the virus could exist. It could be a real thing. It could be something that is killing some people, but so are a lot of fucking other viruses. I mean, HPV, which 90% of people who are sexually active, have, if not more, in women can turn to cancer and can kill people. I'm like, so that virus is, are we going to say because 90% of sexually active adults have it, then we should stop the world and we should fight HPV until it's gone? And the other thing is, we haven't even really thought this all out. Like, how many deaths are going to be acceptable? Like, do we need, because without a doubt, like, even if we have less deaths than the flu, right? Like, are we going to take these deaths more seriously for some reason? Like, that's not going to be acceptable, having less deaths than the flu. We need no deaths. Like, why are so many deaths from other things completely acceptable in regards to, and what I mean by acceptable is that we're not globally or as a country taken action to try to, it's like the war against drugs. Now it's like the war against coronavirus, the war against COVID-19. It's like we've decided that as a nation, we've this one thing is going to get all our attention and deserves all our attention, and deaths by this one thing are way more important than deaths by anything else, because that's what we've decided. We decided as a country that if you die by COVID-19, that it's so important that we need to quarantine everybody, make everybody wear masks, create this crazy environment where you go to a grocery store and everybody's wearing masks and gloves, and if you get too close to them, they're giving you dirty looks and all this stuff. I mean, I go to a grocery store, I'm in shorts, I'm in a t-shirt, and I'm like completely disregarding all the arrows.
Me too.
And
I just can't.
I can't do it. And I'm like, I just look at them like, and the worst part is like, I see people my age, I'm turning 35. I'm like, motherfucker, you're the chance. Even if you believe all the information, even the experts that are on TV that are probably lying to us, even they're saying the majority of young people are gonna be fine. Like, it's killing old people and sick people. Like, so what the fuck are you freaking out about? Like, even if you don't take my word for it, take the word for it of the people who are on TV telling you this. But my point is, like, the flu, hunger, I mean, cholesterol, whatever it may be. I mean, there's so many diabetes. I mean, there's so many things that kill people. I mean, doctors making mistakes,
third leading cause of death.
Yeah.
American medical industry.
Yeah. So you look at all these things also kill people. Like, why have none of them even come close to a reaction like this? Like, none of them. And then you get the argument of like, well, could it be a global conspiracy? Are all the countries in on it? I'm like, no, I think the fucking hysteria started, and it just was this downward spiral of like, well, they're reacting, so now we're gonna test because this could be serious. Oh shit, a lot of people have this virus. Maybe we should start taking action. And then all you're doing is you spotlight every death, that you make it seem like it's way bigger than everything else. Because the truth is, like, if we reported on every single death that happened in the country by the flu, like if we without a doubt said, okay, we're going to report on every single death by the flu, and we were reporting on it every single day, and every news station was constantly telling you one more dead by the flu in this state, in this city, one more death, little by little, it would also start scaring you, and you realize, like, holy shit, this flu thing is fucking serious. It kills a lot of people. But the point is, what I think the majority of people didn't realize is how ignorant we are to people dying every fucking day. We don't like, most of us don't work in an ER room where we see people dying every single day. So we, like, unless somebody close to us dies, we're thinking like most of us are healthy, most of us are good, most of us are waking up every day just fine. We don't realize that, like, no. Thousands, millions of people are dying every day of all different types of things. And if you pinpointed one and you just want to report on these causes of death enough times, that would seem like the biggest deal ever.
Yeah. And if we were to go by, once again, the media has totally misled the public on these things. They made it sound like they were going to be stacking bodies out in front of hospitals, or no room for them. They just, they show that image of that guy filming where they're loading something into the back of an 18-wheeler in front of a New York hospital, and they're like, "Yo, man, you got to take this seriously," like this clip and everything.
I think I saw who was it? It was Corbett talk about that, right?
Goofing on it today. I saw it today. Yeah, and you realize that this is what the media does. They take an event and they either magnify it to a crazy proportion, or they pretend like it doesn't exist at all. So there is much to blame for this panic as anybody. And I wonder, and I hope, I don't have much faith, but I hope that when this is all done, that the people that have been blindly believing their mainstream media will wake up to the fact that there is that the corporate mainstream media cannot be just trusted to give you the facts, that they have an agenda, that they have bosses above them, that their organizations are owned by multinational conglomerates that have interest in pharmaceuticals and the war industry and all of these things. So when you start to hear a push for war or a push for everybody's got to get vaccinated, then you have to, maybe this will wake people up to the reality that the media is not an objective. They're not the fourth pillar. They're not doing what they're not doing their job at all. They stopped doing their job a long time ago. And we didn't get the memo. For most people, just still operate under the assumption that the media is telling us the important stories, and if it's not an important story, then they're not going to talk about it. So meanwhile, like you said, we're going to get COVID-19 up the ass, but we're not going to get smoking related deaths, which are probably exceed it, or drunk driving, which is high, but not as high as COVID-19 or whatever. And everything just gets blurred, and the media then uses that to scare the shit out of you and sell advertising. It's a for-profit business, what they're doing. And so is pharmaceutical, the big pharma. It is a $1 trillion industry. And if you don't think that those people at the pharmaceutical industry would manufacture an event or be involved in fudging data, I will tell you that they have all of them have been convicted in courts of fraud. They are all convicted of felonies. They all have felony convictions. Each one of these companies, they've paid out billions of dollars combined in settlements for faulty products, or for lying, or for fudging tests, or for all of that stuff. They're criminal organizations. They're run every single CEO. I did this because I got a new book coming out. Every CEO of the top 25 big pharma companies, there's only one of them that is a doctor, and he's a doctor of English. Not even a doctor of, even Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, he's not a medical doctor. He's a doctor of something else. I don't know what it is, but it's not a medical doctor. So it's like, even this is a business. They're running a business. And the people that are in a position of power that are making the decisions on all of this, they don't give a flying fuck about you. They don't care. They don't respect you, and they don't care what your thoughts are on these things. They're going to push their plan ahead, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And so maybe when this is all done and we come out of this and everyone kind of looks around and goes, it wasn't as bad as the media made it out to be. Maybe they will realize that the media is the boys who cried wolf.
Well, that's the thing, is that when you look at the suppression of information in regards to, I've had people send me screenshots of them trying to click a link on my page and say, that they're getting that little pop-up that, this isn't a factual ad or article, or it's a conspiracy theory or whatever. Like, you look at that, you look at London Real, you look at so many different issues. The recent story we talked about with Ben Swan and that whole thing with what was it? I just looked it up. The National Institute of Health awarding Wuhan Institute or this lab that studied coronavirus in bats. We gave them 3.7 million in U.S. grants, and this was even after warning them about the risky testing. So I mean, stuff like that, like that's like that's what you're suppressing from the public. Like that's what you're not telling people. Like it people have to put in perspective that, like you said, like it's a business, and it's not, and it's even worse than a business, because if it was only just for profit, which a lot of times they'll fearmonger because it keeps you watching. Like when Nancy Grace used to have some missing cute little girl, she would constantly talk about it. Probably not because she cared so much about, because I mean, you hear people all the time like, well, what the fuck about all the other missing people? But I mean, she would focus on it because maybe it had a good story behind it. Maybe it was a very likable family or whatever it may be, got you emotionally invested, and they would just keep pounding it, and because it was getting ratings. And same thing with the Malaysian airplane when that went missing. They had nothing new to report, but they would keep talking about it, finding creative ways to do segments about it because it kept people watching. And I mean, I have a friend who works at ESPN, and I remember when Jeremy Lin was like blowing up, when everybody was talking about Jeremy Lin, and he was talking about how on the morning shows and all the radio shows on ESPN, how because Jeremy Lin was getting so like the conversation about Jeremy Lin was getting so much attention, that they had, and I guess it's scripted basically. They would say you have to have these amount of minutes, every hour on Jeremy Lin. So even like these casual conversations at the time, like Mike and stuff like that in the morning, like you felt like they were just two dudes talking about sports, but no, they were specifically talking about specific topics a certain amount of time for the purpose of marketing and ratings. So it's like even everything you feel like is real and casual, even the stuff that seems real and casual, is all manipulated for some type of financial purpose. But the media is even worse because now you have think tanks, you have the CIA, you have you know just neocons, people influencing uh, public perception for wars, for pushing propaganda for even more evil purposes than just money, because it's for power, it's for
Yeah.
expanding the empire. So it's like I could justify, I would be more willing to live with it if I thought, okay, they're just trying to make a buck, and that led them down this road where now they're doing, deceiving things or whatever, but it's all for the purpose of money. Then I feel like that would be a little bit more acceptable. But the fact that it's like not just for money, like they're lying because they're actually hurting people, and they're actually pushing wars, unjust wars, and justifying them and whatnot, like that, to me, that makes me much more angry. And so I think people just have to realize that, like, the media, the TV, Google, YouTube, uh, all this shit is deceiving you, and you have to know this, because the only way to fight back is knowing that they're deceiving you. I mean, it's a first step in understanding that, like, okay, maybe I should do more research. Maybe I shouldn't just click on the first couple links that come up on Google. Maybe I shouldn't be using Google.
Right.
Which I think are all stuff that I think even in the alternative media world, it's harder and harder to run into, maybe your podcast, my podcast, anybody who has an alternative perspective, because you're force fed, the NPR podcast, you're force fed, whatever other mainstream podcast that is out there. So I think people really, that's why Broken Simulation, I haven't gotten a chance to upload my shit on there yet. Have you put your stuff on there?
I have.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Just using any other alternative platforms that aren't going to suppress anything. The
Yeah.
way I look at it is like, just give me what I'm looking for. I don't care if you think it's wrong. I don't care if you think it's ridiculous. I don't care if you agree with it. Just give me what I'm looking for and let me decide.
Yeah. 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 And this is just a very great time in our lives to remind everybody that the CIA runs the media. And so when we get these stories coming out of the media, when it says CNN, it might as well just say CIA, because it do know that they maybe forget it, or they perhaps give the people the media the benefit of the doubt and say, well, in times of crisis like this, they put all their propaganda off to the side, but we've got to, because it's important. No, they do not. This is when the propaganda ramps up 100-fold, because this is when everybody's watching. So they make sure that the propaganda is out front and center. So it's impossible to tell what is even true when you're getting information from the Washington Post and the New York Times and ABC and NBC and CBS and CNN and Fox and the BBC and all. It's all garbage, because they're all run by the intelligence agencies. It's not even a debate. It's a fact. They've declassified. They talked about it in the mid-'70s in the Church Committee hearings, where they asked if the CIA had influence in these people, and they said they admitted to it. I mean, so we have to be careful of the information that we get, the sources of it. So us conspiracy theorists who are getting flagged on social media for a post not being true, it's like, well, what are you basing that on? Are you basing it on the official narrative? Because the official narrative is rarely ever true. So if our version is different from the official narrative, it's more likely that we're correct and that they're wrong, based on a 60-year history of the mainstream media just blatantly and obviously lying to the public all the time. So it's weird. Here we go. We go back to like fact checking. Well, I went to Snopes, and Snopes said it wasn't true, so it's not true. And you're like, holy shit. Like, I mean, what sort of idiot do you have to be to not understand? But once again, you have to unpack this whole conversation for somebody that's just coming into it, and they're like, I've seen it on the TV and it's true. And you're like, oh man, I don't even have time to explain this to you. It'll take too long. So we're doing what we can. We're talking about these important things. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. But I'll tell you what, I at least know that I'm coming from a good place of trying to figure it out. My only agenda is trying to figure out what the truth is. I'm sure yours is the same. So at least I know that my intentions are correct. Now, whether I get the story wrong, and I'm going to get we're going to get parts of this story wrong. It's too hard to sort out what's true and what's fake. At least I know my intentions are pure, but I question almost everybody I see on television because I can't tell who they are. I don't know who they are as a person. I don't know who they really work for. I don't know who their producer is. I don't know who's in their ear telling them to get off this topic and get on to something else. I don't know who their sponsors are, which is Big Pharma, who would profit immensely from this coronavirus mandatory vaccine. I mean, you just have to take into account there's so many aspects of it. It's a bit much, but I think if everyone just comes at this from the understanding that if you're getting your information from the mainstream media, be very careful of it. It's not to say that they can't be right about some things. They will be right about some things because that's the art of a good lie, is that you've got to have some truth in there so people can recognize the truth and tie that to something else that they know is truthful. And then therefore it validates the whole story or argument or whatever that they're trying to pitch. But you got to remember that there's also some lies in there too. And it's just a matter of the amount of, as I put in this article that I wrote for Activist Post, it's all about the amount of disinfo, the allowable amount of disinfo crickets that are allowed to be added to the peanut butter that is being made. You know, there's a certain percentage of insects that the FDA allows to be in the peanut butter. And so you know that there's some disinformation crickets in there. You just don't know how much of it, because when it all gets blended up, it all looks the same. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. I mean, it's not that they're always lying to you because like you said, that's how they say in business is coming off at times as like a you're gonna get like decent articles, decent maybe you're gonna click on something and be like, oh shit, who wrote this? Oh, this is on Washington Post's website, or you're gonna every once in a while you're gonna find some decent pieces of work, and that's okay, but you have to filter that out and understand that, like, okay, just because they were reliable or this one article seems to make sense and it seems like it's good reporting, it doesn't mean that everything that they do is going to be good reporting. And I think that's one of the things that becomes very difficult for people, that eventually people are like, well, I don't know what the fuck to believe, so I'm just gonna, ignorance is bliss, I'm just gonna ignore all of it, and I don't care. But a lot of times with a little bit of research you can find out, like you were talking about, don't believe any of the reporters or whatnot. Like with a little bit of research, you can find out pretty easily, like if this person's on TV, like who are they linked to? Look at the Morning Joe lady, Brzezinski's. Look who her father is. Like, how many people watch that show and don't know who her father is? Right. And it's like people are just like, oh, these are just people who are good at talking and they're good at hosting a show, and that's all they. It's like, no. A lot of these people have ties to other rich and famous people, other elites, other powerful people. They have family members that help them get the gig. A lot of people didn't even know that Cuomo and Cuomo were related. It's like, you're like, oh, I didn't know. Yeah, you think this motherfucker's on TV like just by happenstance? Like it was just a luck of the draw? Like, no, dude. Like these people who end up. I mean, obviously everybody or a lot of people listening would be familiar with like the ties to the CIA and Anderson Cooper, stuff like that. And people are like, oh, well, he might have just only worked there for a little bit. Well, how many fucking people who are trying to be a host of a show or a news anchor go work for the CIA or have any ties to the CIA? Like that doesn't seem like a detour that I would be taking if I'm pursuing try to get in media. It just doesn't make any sense. So, but if you're the CIA, it does make sense. And if you know Operation Mockingbird, it does make sense to kind of, get somebody who is friendly to you, who maybe can push some agenda or whatnot in there and have more of those puppets. And you see it now. I mean, regardless where you stand on any political view or party, it's obvious that they all have agendas. They're all either for somebody, for a political party, or they're anti-political party. So that alone tells you, and it's quite open and it's quite obvious, and everybody would agree that, like, yeah, CNN hates Trump, yeah, MSNBC hates Trump, oh yeah, Fox News is friendlier to Trump, they like Trump. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they all have a agenda. They all have
Yes,
a
yes.
opinion, and they're going to be biased to that opinion. It's like me trying to have an open discussion with somebody who comes out and says, "Oh yeah, I'm a hardcore Republican. I've been a Republican my whole life. My dad was a Republican." It's like, okay, I know that you're going to be a little biased in certain parts of this conversation, and that's going to influence your outlook and your ability to be completely open-minded. So why aren't we looking at the media as the same way? Like they obviously have a agenda. They obviously have a opinion, and they have people they like and dislike. Why wouldn't you think that's going to have effect on their reporting and the truths or how much they're going to tell you, how much they're not going to tell you, because of there's a purpose of making this person look bad or making that person look good. It's not just factual information. Hey, this is what happened. Let me just tell you what happened. You get that from maybe your local news, like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened in your town. Like this is the weather. That there was a car accident on this street at this time. Like that's news. Like what they're doing is giving you opinion and confusing you to make you think it's news, and that's where
Yeah.
people are really confused is the news and opinion. And none of these news stations should even be called news stations. I mean, it's like E-entertainment. I mean, we don't call E-entertainment news even though they have a news show on celebrities, right? Like it's not news. Like it's probably actually those shows are probably closer to news because they're just reporting on what the celebrities are doing than the
Right.
news stations, because the news stations are actually giving you their opinion on what they think the president is doing right or wrong. They're giving you their opinion on news stories. They're not actually just giving you the facts, and that's I think most people are confused by that.
Well, even the local stations got outed. You're talking about how they report on the weather and the car accidents, and somebody ran over a fire hydrant on this intersection, and all that stuff is it's just the facts, and there's nothing too polarizing about that. But then you see that Sinclair Media Group, that owns all of the local, owns 200 local channels, and they put out that PSA that they all did where they had their individual news anchors read the same script talking about we have to get in front of fake news. It's a threat to our democracy. And someone did that compilation where they put them all together where they're all saying the same thing at the same time. And you go, shit, even the local news is totally manufactured as well. So you can't even trust them. So we're at a severe disadvantage. Maybe not you and me or the listeners, because I think the people that watch your show or mine, they're aware of this. I mean, they get this, but the vast majority of people that for whatever reason don't have an interest or don't know, they don't even know that there is a war out there for their mind, as Alex Jones says with InfoWars, that there is an information war going on. They don't even know that that's happening, let alone that the media is compromised. And I'm not criticizing them, because I was that guy for a very long time. I just gave them the benefit of the doubt. I didn't think that I thought that there was Republicans versus Democrats. They were slanted that way, but like to just fully manufacture stories or events or shoot footage in a way that makes it appear that there's, like the hurricane guy a year ago, where the guy's like pretending like he's getting blown over, and then there's two guys walking in the background in shorts and a tank top that are just walking by fine. They're fucking lying to you about everything. They can't even be honest about a hurricane. They have to manufacture that stuff. So I think the media is the most dangerous organization around, because they can make lies seem like truths, and they can make truths seem like lies, and they can make truthful people look like liars, and they can make liars look like truthful people. It's very devious. And so I think the sooner people realize that, and hopefully, and there's not going to be many good things that come out of this event, but maybe if one of them is that the people are a little bit more distrustful of their mainstream media, well, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that we podcasts. That's why I think podcasts right now are so important, because subscribing to somebody's RSS feed is the one place where you haven't seen a whole lot of suppression or issues yet. YouTube, obviously, Google, all the other, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. But if you like a podcast, you can subscribe to somebody's podcast, and you can get that new episode every time a new episode comes out without anybody suppressing it from you, without anybody, or at least for the time being. I know on YouTube, like, people aren't getting notified when new videos are coming up, but for the time being, I haven't seen that issue with podcasts. People are still getting notified when new podcasts are coming out and whatnot. So thank God we have podcasts, and thank God documentaries. For a long time, YouTube was awesome. You could find tons of really thought-provoking documentaries. Now you're seeing more and more of them being suppressed. It's becoming much harder if you search any specific topic to find interesting documentaries on those topics. So I actually have a documentary playlist on my YouTube channel, and I'm constantly putting stuff on there. Since I started the YouTube channel, I was constantly putting stuff on there, and every once in a while I'll go on there and just like delete a video, delete a video, delete a video, delete a video, and I'm like, well, what the fuck, man? I'm like, what happened to all these videos? And it's like you're constantly fighting. And thank God there's people who are always uploading, re-uploading documentaries or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's getting much harder. So I think now that's why I told you before when you're like the joke about like, you know, there's already so many fucking podcasts in the world. Well, who needs another podcast?
Right.
Like I told you, like I think now more than ever we do need more podcasts. In regards to podcasts like these, I think the more the merrier, because the more of these conversations that are out there, the more likely somebody might run into one of these conversations, and it might help them go down that rabbit hole and kind of you know, figure shit out a little bit. So but thanks, Charlie. I really appreciate your time. You staying sane through all this? Or have you been exercising, playing video games, watching movies? What have you been doing to pass the time?
We've been watching a lot of movies. I've been watching Ozark at night. Been partaking in some edibles, which is good for watching Netflix at night. But yeah, I've been pre-recording a bunch of podcasts in the meantime. I've got like 35 episodes that I've done that are just done, waiting to go. So I've taken advantage of this time to do that. If anyone's interested, they can find my podcast called Macroaggressions on Apple and iHeartRadio and Spotify and on David Icke's Iconic platform and also on YouTube. So I've been getting into it. It turned out to be good timing for me as far as launching my show, which started on March 7th. So it's only been out for 40 days or so. But I've had a good time doing it, and I've been keeping sane in that regard, but just barely, just barely.
I actually think these podcasts have been helping with my sanity, just because one thing that when you're social distancing was something that you miss a lot is long form conversation, and I've been able to have them with a lot of friends and people that on the show. So it's nice to kind of still have these discussions. But one thing we're definitely learning is that even with all these people Zooming and using Zoom and Skype to stay in contact with loved ones, it's not the same. Like something's like when you're all hanging out and drinking, but you're at your own house and you're Zooming. Yeah, it's cool for like a little bit, but like I think after a while, I think it's better than the alternative, and that's like not seeing any your friends or family. But it's definitely not as good as what we should be able to do. I mean, the other week my wife was doing it with a bunch of family, and I'm just the worst part, she was doing it with a lot of my family that lives like right in town. Like we could a 1-minute drive to their house. I'm like, why the fuck are all you guys who are not old, like it's like literally like 2 minutes away from everybody's house, and everybody's drinking and enjoying themselves in their own house, and literally it would take 2 seconds for everybody just to come together and hang out and actually enjoy each other's company. And it was so frustrating, because it's like it was a sign that people have just accepted this. Like they're just they're like, this is what even though we live right down the street from each other, and like we're just gonna Zoom, and like what the fuck? Like I don't know, it's frustrating. It's I feel like this whole scenario has brought out the Alex Jones in me. I just constantly find myself getting so upset. But I feel bad for my freaking kids. I mean, obviously school sucks, so I don't really give a shit about school. But just them to be able to like see their friends for them to, I mean, they're like adults, man. They I mean, when they're out of a routine, they don't feel like themselves either. My daughter, who's actually usually moodier, like she's a little harder to negotiate with and like calm down. Like my son doesn't have as much of a temper. Like she's the one who's actually been handling this the best, to be honest. And my son has been the opposite, where he's been like super emotional. Like at times he seems like himself, and then other times he doesn't seem like himself. And it's like I keep telling my wife, I'm like, we need to like make sure you keep that tolerance really high. Make sure you understand that the same way this is hard for us, it's hard for them too. Like they're completely out of the routine, and not just that, the same way we're confused. And we can actually read shit and research stuff, and we're still confused on what the fuck's going on. Like imagine them. Like they're they have no fucking idea what's going on, and even when you explain it to them, it's still super confusing. So I feel bad for all the freaking kids who just like can't be around their friends, don't understand really why they can't be around their friends. I mean, my kids are constantly asking me, we're going for walks or we go somewhere, and we'll walk to a convenience store just to get the hell out of the house, and my kids will be like, why is everybody wearing a mask again? And I'm like, oh, everybody's just this has been a great motivator to get my kids to take their vitamins, because I'm like, hey, you know how like I'm always really strict with you guys taking your vitamins every day and making sure you eat good. Yeah, you can have a snack from time to time, have some candy, but make sure you eat good and you take your vitamins. I'm like, this is what happens when you don't take your vitamins and you don't eat good. I'm like, I'm like, you have to wear a mask because of your immune system. Your body's so weak it can't fight sicknesses and colds. So like, it's been a great like my kids. I mean, they've been taking their vitamins every day without even fighting with me at all because of all this. So there's been some positive things, but yeah, without a doubt, I mean, I feel bad for all the healthy people, all the people who have been absolutely mentally. I mean, suicide hotlines have gone up like some ridiculous amount. I mean, there's people who really are mentally getting messed up, and of course, like all the people who might not have jobs when we do open this up again, the jobs might not be there. So when we look back, it's gonna be like the Iraq War, right? We're gonna have all these justifications for this reaction. Then after it's all said and done, we're gonna be like, "Oops, yeah, we fucked up," But yet there's gonna be consequences. There's gonna be casualties. There's gonna be people who have PTSD. There's gonna be people who have lost limbs. There's going to be, that's what happened with the Iraq War. Same thing with this. Like, there's going to be people who the long-term effects of this are going to go on for a long time, and yet, like, all we're going to do is be like, yeah, maybe we overestimated it. Oh, maybe we reacted a little too crazy. So, yeah, I mean, I told myself I wasn't going to get worked up, but I did.
Yeah, well, it's that invisible enemy again. Right. We got to fight the invisible enemy. It's always convenient when you can't see who the enemy is, but we got to fight them. We got to fight them here, or else we got to fight them there in Iraq, or else they'll come here. Or now it's this virus. Well, we got to fight the virus. Okay, here we go again, spending money and screwing everything up based on what maniacs tell us, and so we're in. It's a sad situation. It's an indictment on how gullible we can be and how dependent we are on the mainstream media for information and how to behave. It's really sad. And I hope that the people out there that are, for some people, they'll be watching this and it'll be a real situation to them because they'll know somebody that got sick. Now, I don't know if that person would have been sick with the flu. I don't know if this is some strain of the flu or if it's a bioweapon. I just know that the actuality of it is not matching the hype, and the hype, was used as the justification to shut everything down. And we can turn the economy back. I mean, we can just say, oh, it's all lifted and go back to work, but the damage is done. And we're in big trouble. And I'm getting text messages from my daughter saying it's pizza time downstairs. So
hey, sorry.
I guess back to, in the end, there's that reality that I have a family, I've got to take care of them, and I've got to do these things. And so, I have to keep that in mind. That
how great. And I always say this all the time to my wife, my kids. I'm always like, we spend way too much time complaining about the things we don't have and not appreciating the things we do have. And people like yourself and I, like, we are lucky that we do have. We're quarantined in our house, but we're not alone. Like, we at least have a wife. We have children, we have people to go through this with, and kind of have kind of a supporting cast to kind of stay sane. There's some people who they live alone. They don't have any family or friends that they live with, so or might be freaking out and don't want them to go to their house or whatever. I mean, I have an aunt who's quarantined herself for like, 2 months or, because she was concerned about all this and completely like freaked out. And my family members were dropping food off on her porch. She wouldn't even leave the house. Like, it's just, and I'm like, and she lives alone. So it's like, at least if she had a family, they could all be stuck together. But yeah, so it's it definitely could always be worse. That I completely understand. And it's like Damian Lillard once shared a quote like, your worst day is somebody else's best day. And I try to remember that, that like, it definitely could be worse. But I also I also know that there's a lot of people who this is having even a larger effect on their lives and their situation than it is on us, and those are people I feel bad for, so but anyways, I'm holding you up from your pizza. And
That's all right.
Thanks, Charlie. It's always a blast talking.
Likewise.
Yeah, these conversations are casual, and I think we do. I think our podcasts and especially our conversations are like great alternatives to the Rogan podcast because it's a similar format, like you said.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we're not afraid to dive into any rabbit hole.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm way past the point of people thinking I'm a conspiracy theorist weirdo. I've written a book detailing it. So
yeah,
that's fine. But I appreciate you having me on, and we'll do it again. We'll just continue to monitor this and see how things go, and we'll look back on this and at some point and laugh at how crazy, how far off we were, or maybe pat ourselves on the back for being right.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but the first Swapcast we did with Jeffrey Wilson from the Conspiracy Farm and Robbie Martin, right? That was the one with Robbie Martin.
Yep.
And I mean, a lot of us were getting information that the National Guard was coming in and there was some chance of like complete martial law and all this stuff. And I mean, we were off in regards to the speed of things. We thought it was all going to happen that weekend. And, what they did is they slowly started saying, oh, only 100 people, then only 50 people, then 25 people. And I think that's probably what helped people getting upset so quickly was the fact that it's like, oh, let's do it. Let's take away their rights and freedoms and the things they enjoy in life in little baby steps. So that way they don't get upset all at once. So, I mean, that might have been the plan. But again, we were wrong in regards to how quickly we thought it was going to happen. And I think it's like you said, it's a moving target. We're not married to any ideas, and we're willing to have an opinion based on the information we have. But if that information changes, we'll look at things slightly different. So I think that's super important too.
Yeah, I do too.
Hey, thanks, Charlie. Hey,
all right,
we'll
man.
touch, and I'm sure we'll probably talk again in the near future.
I'm sure we will. Take care.